What's up guys? Today we're gonna go through the init strategy that I was using on last reset that many people were asking questions about, like how does this work and how is this even possible. And basically the crux of this theme is that we're gonna polymorph the Taras with Wukong A2 and then we're just gonna kill it with init and he's gonna be block revived, and after that you're just gonna full out of the team and it's gonna be done. And it might sound very simple on paper, but this kind of technically involves some kind of like bug or weird coding in the game that enables this, because of course the issue that everybody is wondering that why is this possible is that UDK is gonna redirect the like first hit of every attack onto himself. And how are we able to polymorph the Taras? Well, that is kind of a weird mechanic around Shamail and like UDK passives, and Taras as well. But basically at the start of the fight, the Taras is gonna fear everybody. And let's just go into the fight and see how it looks in the practice. But at the start of the fight, Shamail is gonna fear everybody in our team. And I mean, Taras is gonna fear everybody in our team. And then Shamail is gonna remove all of those fears and give turn meter to whoever is our party leader, and then hit Taras as counter attack. And because of that, when it doesn't go on anybody's turn, it already uses the UDK passive. And now only on this first turn of the fight, when Wukong goes first because of all of the turn meter boost that he got from Shamail, Wukong's A2 is not gonna be redirected by UDK, and that's why we're gonna be able to polymorph Taras. As you can see, he counter attacked now a couple times, and now because Taras is polymorphed, we have our like slow team. Everybody, or not everybody, but Shamail and init are very slow builds, and we will talk about that in detail more later. But basically we have speed tuned init. Now, wow, the UDK almost killed the init. I don't think that has happened once that it killed, but I think he hit 26k, so maybe it has some kind of damage built on it. But we have speed tuned the init to basically try to go after Taras, and this can definitely have some complications if somebody has extremely fast or slow Taras. But in my experience against vast majority of the teams, this works. Like on the last reset, I had 2 fights that I lost with this team. The other fight was because Taras resisted the polymorph, which can happen, but it's very rare and bad RNG. And then there was one team that was too fast, where I didn't get the right timing, but basically it works against most teams. And now that the Taras was polymorphed, he lost half of his health, and he also doesn't have any buffs, as you can see. And now we can just finish it off with init A2. And even though UDK passive now redirects the first hit of every champion, but init A2 hits 3 times, and it gets increased damage the lower enemy HP is. So it actually starts to hit fairly high when the enemies, like when the Taras is at 50% HP, and then we do multiple hits after that. And basically that's it for strategy. Now there is some specific speeds and other things that you need for this setup, but that's the crux of it. So let's do one fight, and maybe we can get a bit faster fight to like showcase that. Usually the fights are around 1 minute, 1 minute 20. Some fights can even be as slow as as fast as 40 seconds. And sometimes really bad fights are like 2 minutes, but I think the fights are generally around 1 minute. Now, you can't hit every team with this, but the team that we just fought, Maritska, Sifi, Taras, UDK, that is literally the best defense team in the game, and nothing else is even comparable. Right now, we are not super high in Platinum, and it's not reset, so we're not seeing a lot of this. Well, as you can see, at the top we are seeing this team a lot, but on reset, out of top 20, it's probably gonna be like 15 to 20 teams that are running that exact team. So even though it might seem like it only works against specific teams, well, you can hit other teams than just that with it, but it's gotta be Tara's teams though. But it is the best team in the game that you can hit with this team, so it's actually very relevant. And of course, you can hit teams that don't have UDK, but the entire point of this team is that the UDK makes this kind of team like extra hard. And if it was the same team with something else than UDK, you could easily fight it with Rotos and many other champions and still do very fast fight. So this is specifically for the UDK, but it can also work very well against something like Necret, because it's of course gonna remove all of the Necret protections and so on. But let's do one fight where we try to get a little bit faster match for the video. And of course, if you want to get more examples, you should watch my last reset video, where I was only using this team the entire video, and it went very well, considering my account and my defense team isn't the best either, so I definitely got hit tons by the top accounts in the game. But as you can see, the fights themselves are fairly straightforward and it's pretty much full auto. You're gonna target the Taras at the start of the fight, so that the AI is gonna focus it, and after that you can pretty much auto, though like you could target specific champions like the Sifi or Duchess to kill them first and try to make the fight faster, but that's basically the crux of it. Now, of course, everybody doesn't have init, but also at the same time, lots of people who have, or like basically nobody who has init is using it. Init is considered one of the worst void champions in the game, and there's hardly any reason to use him. He doesn't hit hard, he's probably the squishiest legendary nuker in the entire game. I think he has base HP of is it 11k or 13k? Something along the lines of Rotos without any passives to go along with it. Oh wait, okay, it's 14k with 800 or 900 defense, but Init is insanely squishy. There's really no other way to use him unless you can fight against a team that will literally do 0 damage against you, which was kind of possible if you were using UDK and enemy was only using single target nukers in defense. But in this current meta, nobody is using defense teams like that, except some free-to-play scrubs like me, but everybody is using Taras in defense, and you can't really use nukers who can take many hits from Taras. But with this strategy, you can basically get around that issue. And now if we get a little bit more specific about the builds, as I mentioned before, you basically want to make it so that your init, or like the Wukong needs to go first in your team, which is gonna be boosted by Jamal passive and Taras passive. And of course you want your Reviver to go before, or your Duchess or other champion with attack buff. For instance, Brockney would be another excellent choice, and basically probably maybe even better than Duchess, but Duchess is definitely not better than Brockney. They are the same or similar, but you need a champion that does attack buff, and preferably, or it should do 3 buffs in total for the Shamal A2 to get the max damage scaling. But Wukong needs to be fastest and the party leader. That is vital, because only party leader gets the turn meter boost from Jamal passive. But I have Wukong at 329 speed and as fast as you can get. So I would say that you don't want to make it too fast, because if your Wukong goes 2 or 3 times before your init, it might increase the chance that enemy is gonna cut in, and maybe Maritzka is gonna move twice before your init and move once after the polymorph ends. But basically what happens with the polymorph is that polymorph has a base speed of 150, which is very important to know for this strategy. And as you can see, we have Wukong at 329 speed, and Duchess at 320, so that Duchess is gonna go after it and try to put Veil and block debuffs on us before init the turn, so that enemy Siphi doesn't sleep us or the UDK doesn't fear us and so on. Though usually most UDKs are gonna be incredibly slow and not built for damage like the last enemy that we had, so that was very unusual. But we only have init at 161 speed, and in my experience from testing, I would say that something like, of course, taking into account that if sheep is 150 speed, we also get the Wukong speed aura, but then also enemy gets Siphi turn meter boost, and Taras isn't sheeped right from the start of the fight, so it gets a bit more complicated than just 150 speed and you try to speed tune around it. But in my experience from testing, anything from 140 to 170 speed seems to be good. And sometimes you might encounter the issue that somebody has like 0 speed Taras, and then that might cause issues. Or if they have insanely fast Siphi and Taras or Mariska, and for instance Mariska opens with her cleanse, and then she happens to move a second time after the Taras polymorph ends and heals him. But this is very rare, it really doesn't happen often to me, and to be honest, there isn't really much sense for the top accounts in Platinum to alter their defense teams to counter this offense team, because if you make your Taras insanely slow or you make your Siphi and Mariska insanely fast, that is just gonna make issues with other normal offense teams that people use. So I wouldn't be really too worried about people trying to counter this exact team. But as I mentioned, I think around 140 to 170 seems good. I will say that I prefer the 150 to 160 mark. That seems to be the most consistent, but it's still very consistent with this standard. I mean, you're not gonna get 100% win rate with this team, but like I said, on last reset I lost 2 fights, and one of them was because polymorph was resisted. And then the third champion in this team, Shamal, he of course has to be the slowest in the team, and this might actually be kind of good opportunity for people, because this basically means that since you specifically want to have this kind of slow init, you don't want it to be faster than this. Like I said, I would go 170 speed at tops and not higher than this. But that means that you can use gear that you wouldn't want to use on your other nukers, which doesn't have speed substats on them that is too slow. And you can try to make use out of gear that has high damage but no speed that you basically wouldn't use otherwise. And it's very easy to gear both Init and Shamal for this reason. And as you can see, we only have Shamal at 138 speed, but of course with high damage. And he can basically be any speed, but it has to be slower than Init. And that's pretty much it, like, for the builds. Of course, one thing to take into account with Shamal passive, or not the passive, but his damage from the A2, is that it ignores 25% defense, and then additional 25 for each buff that he has. So you need to have some kind of attack buff champion in this team that has 2 other buffs, and I think the 2 typical best options are gonna be Brockney and Duchess. And you definitely, like I said, you don't need Duchess for this team. I think Brockney might almost be better than Duchess because he has a little bit heals and he has the shield. So I mean, Duchess has heals with revives, but Brockney heals when damage is down to his shield, so I think it might actually protect your Init a little bit better. But even if Init dies in this team, that's not the issue. As long as you heal the Shamal at the start of the fight, you basically win. But let's actually pull up my builds from the Hell Hades website so that you can see the specific items that I have on them. But on Jamal, as you can see, I'm actually using Swift Parry just because you can basically use anything. You don't need Savage on him, you don't need Cruel, because you're already ignoring the enemy defense fully. Now technically on the A1 you would do a little bit more damage if you have Savage and Cruel, but I don't think that really makes any difference, to be honest. So I would personally, I mean, I could definitely put him in Savage and Cruel, but I rather just don't use it so that I can use it on other champions, and I basically try to get the most use out of my trash gear that is kind of good on paper, like these gloves, but that I would actually never use in practice. But like I said, anything goes. One thing that you should note here though is that for this strategy it's essential that your Wukong goes first in the fight, and some of those Sifis can be insanely fast. We're talking like 400 to 460 speed. That is actually very normal in Platinum Arena. It's not going to be rare at all to meet Sifis that are well above 400 speed. So the Shamal passive removes the fears that Taras puts on your team and then gives turn meter to your leader. And for that reason, you actually wouldn't want to have Stone Skin in your team, because those champions wouldn't be feared and you wouldn't gain extra turn meter. So often people would build something like Shamal in Stone Skin or the Duchess and so on. But for this strategy, you don't want to do that. Or actually, I guess you can build Shamal in Stone Skin, but if we quickly take a look at Taras passive, or one of his billion different passives. Which one is it? Yeah, he has like 500 million passives, so can't even know which we're talking about. But it's the Fierce Battle passive, or the second passive in this passive. But it fears all of the enemies from Orcs, Ogrun, Undead Hordes, and Demon Spawn. Wait, is it not Knight Revenant? Basically the evil factions except Dark Elves and Knight Revenant. So it's not gonna affect Shamael, but Duchess, Rotos, like whatever champions you use in those factions, it's important that they are not in Stone Skin. Just to like give the full context about all of the nuances of this team. And then for the Duchess, like this is my main Duchess that I usually use, who is very slow and tanky, but I'm not using her. I'm using my second Duchess, and I'm not really using her for anything else, so I can just kind of put her in random gear. But you could basically use anything on her apart from Stone Skin. And like I said, Brogni is just as good, if not better, so you can totally do this team even without Duchess. And you could use other champions too, but I think the main factors are that they should ideally do 3 different buffs, and an attack buff should be one of them. But of course, you could get you could use a champion that only has attack buff and one more buff if you use Shamal with some kind of other sets like immunity or Stone Skin for his passive. And then init way is just full damage, as you can see. Very slow and full damage, but I kind of did the same thing here as I did with Shamal. That none of this, I mean, this gear is of course good. I'm not gonna say it's not good gear, but all of my best sets that I could make are on lethal, and this set is of course incredibly slow. I would never use this otherwise. So again, I'm kind of using my trash, quote unquote, trash pieces that I wouldn't use otherwise. So I recommend you guys to do something like this as well. And like I said, this is one of the the good things about this team is that since basically the champions that you're gonna use is init that you're probably not using like anyway, and then you're gonna use either Duchess or Brogni or one other attack buff champion, but you have plenty of choices there. And then Shamal, who is epic champion. The only champion in this team that you probably might use in other builds as well, or just use in general, is going to be Wukong. Oh, actually, this is the wrong build. This is my nuke build. Let me quickly try to update the Hell Hades website so that you can see my actual build. But what I do with him is that I use my Wukong I use my Wukong in nuke build outside of Platinum Arena reset for live arena, and then for classic arena I change him back to this build. Okay, now we got the correct build. But here's what I'm running on Wukong. This is probably the hardest build to do on this team, because you do want to build Wukong as fast as possible for this strategy. But one thing to note here is that often when people build support Wukongs or any champion with debuffs, they usually nowadays build them with resistance because of the change to polymorph and you needing accuracy to proc it unless you have it at 6-star. But for this strategy specifically, it doesn't really matter if you have high accuracy or any resistance at all, because the only thing that we really need to land is the polymorph on Taras. And even if you do get polymorphed from it, or it doesn't matter, and you definitely are gonna have enough accuracy to debuff a nuker. So of course it would be nice if after that you can also buff strip and place block buffs debuff on the enemy team, but it's not necessary. But what is more important is that your Wukong needs to be fast, because it needs to go before anybody else in the fight, or you're gonna lose. And this speed actually might seem even too slow for that, but when we have the Shamal boost, it should be enough. But you could definitely build Wukong even faster, but the most important thing on your Wukong build is gonna be his speed, and resistance is completely irrelevant and accuracy is kind of secondary, so I would go with something like this or whatever you have. And as you can see on his build, I didn't even bother to change his amulet or ring, and they are both the ones that I would use in the nuke build. And I think it's actually kind of beneficial, because he can still do a good amount of damage even with the support build, because he scales very hard. So sometimes he's still gonna do like 60k A2s even when he's not built for damage at all. So I wouldn't really even consider putting tanky accessories on him, since it doesn't really make any like any positive impact on your fights anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this strategy. I was planning to make video about this, of course, but so many people asked about this in comments, so I kind of had to explain it many times. But I wanted to do a separate video for this as well, just to make it very clear. Let's see if we can do one more fight and prove that this strategy works. Okay, this might be a very hard fight. Let's see that if we can defeat this team with insanely empowered revivers. Also, one thing that you want to be very fast in the fight with this, because if you're too slow clicking to target the Taras, then Wukong is gonna hit UDK or somebody else. And if you screw up the start of the fight, then you're basically gonna lose it. So you need to be quick, or you need to turn off the auto so that you can actually target the Taras at the start of the fight. Also, if the enemy has very empowered tanky Tarases, you might encounter the issue that you don't have enough damage to actually finish him off, but it kind of depends on the gear. And for me specifically, I don't think I have encountered that issue once, but I heard from other people in my clan that they encountered this issue, and they were basically saying that don't hit +4 Tyranses with this team comp. I haven't honestly found too many of those teams, and the couple ones that I found I was actually able to kill, but I probably would be cautious about them, and you probably need to do a decent amount of testing with this team to see if your init has enough damage or against what kind of teams you have damage, enough damage. Of course my init has very insane gear, so it is what it is, but that's it for this video. I hope that you found this helpful or interesting at least. It's definitely something different than the usual stuff that you see, that everybody is doing fights with double Taras and Maritska, or they're using a speed team with Charge It and Lockout and these kind of, in my opinion, boring stuff that everybody has been using forever, and there hasn't really been any interesting free-to-play friendly alternatives since Kala. Now, to be fair, init isn't very it's not a fusion champion, but I would almost count init as free-to-play friendly because it's a champion that nobody who has actually uses. But anyway, that's it for this video, and see ya.